This is our last door bottom. I'm going to set the saw up for the grooving of drawer bottoms. I just drop the lock in to lock the table in stationary. Bring my scoring blade down out of play. Set my blade with a height indicator to give me the height for the score. Set my fence, 11.3 millimeters. Move the fence into the 4 position. And then I'll place my carts in the position I need them in. This stack of carts is the drawer bottoms themselves. Again, I'm going to be working in a C shape or U shape as I'm working in a cell. This cart is designed specifically to hold the drawer backs or tailgates in this top portion and the drawer bottoms in the bottom portion. Before I actually move ahead, I want to check and make sure that groove is in the right location, that this fits just snug. It's a little too tight, so we'll readjust. Just drop down a millimeter. We want a nice snug fit. It's still a little too large. Double check that last setting. When I get done grooving all of these drawer bottoms, I'm going to move back to the grooving of the sides of the cabinets that we did earlier to receive the backs. We'll be doing that in just a moment as soon as we finish this. Groove the unfinished ends to receive the backs. Want to check our depth, cut. Then we groove these. So I've got the ID away from me. Again, it's away from me. And then when I place it on the outfeed card, it's away from me. Again, you're working in a C or U shape as a work cell. As you bring in new employees, it's very easy to teach them how to do this because you've got a very specific sequence of events and how you want it done. We're going to move from here, once we get all these sides grooved, over to the skid boring machine to bore a 15 millimeter hole in the bottom of the decks to receive the skids, and then later that skid will receive the leg. Next process is we're going to skid bore, and I'm checking my settings here by my jig. Turn my machine on. We're boring the 15 millimeter holes based off of a stop. We'll bore 4 holes, 1 on each front and back, each side. These will receive the skids themselves, and later the skids will receive the legs. Again, we're working in a U shape. Part ID is to me when I start and ends up away from me when I end. When we get done here, we're going to move to the edge bander and band all the parts we've sawn and grooved and bored and all of those things. Alright, we're going to start edge banding our tailgates, or the back of the drawer. These parts will go from here over to the grass boring machine to be bored for the Zargan drawer system. We've got a transfer batch of 7, but we've pre-prepared some of the parts to save on time on what you're having to view. These parts are going to be rolled over to staging at the boring machine. And again, you'll notice we're working in the same U or C shape we've been working in at each station. These parts, in order to provide them to the assembler as quickly as possible, go directly off of their last process into the parts rack that you see straight in front of us. This gets the part to the assembler as quickly as possible so he can start assembling boxes simultaneously. As you can see, we're loading parts in from one side and he could be pulling parts out from the other side. Next we'll do our nailers and stretchers, and again these will go straight to the parts rack to get the parts to the assembler as quickly as possible. As we were numbering the parts at the saw, we placed them in a position that would make them visible to the assembler once they're placed in this rack. Everything with the exception of unfinished ends is marked on the left corner, and when that part's placed in there, that number's facing the assembly area. You see how we've simplified this process, and it's not a real complex process. This is how you can utilize fairly simple labor rather than having to have cabinet makers at some of these simple stations. You've taken a lot of the complexity out of cabinet making by doing this. Now that was all our stretchers for those 3 cabinets. Now we're doing our nailers. Alright, now we're going to band the unfinished ends. With unfinished ends, we band the top, the bottom, and the face of these ends. Everything else is just opposite edge of the ID, but these are top, bottom, and opposite edge of the ID. Now we're going to double line bore the ends. At this point, we're working in a C shape, and we're getting the parts to our assembler as quickly as possible. So we've got our right ends indexed off the right side. The left stop is folded to the back so we don't make the mistake of boring a right end left or a left end right. Now we'll reverse our stops to bore our left ends. And as soon as these last two parts are bored, our assembler can begin the assembly process. And then we'll continually feed him from that part forward with more and more parts. If your assembly rack were primed from the days before production, then of course your assembler would still be producing products from yesterday's time. From here, as we finish the line boring, we're going to go to the assembly area to assemble some boxes. Alright, we're going to set this machine up to do tailgates, which is the drawer backs. And our instructions tell us to use a flipper stop, which you see here. And we're going to run our part face down with a raw edge against the fence. As long as you have these instructions right here printed on the machine, makes it simple for your operators, prevents the opportunity for a mistake. We pre-drilled some of these to have them prepared for this video. Now we're going to drill our drawer fronts. Again, we've pre-drilled some for the video purposes. We remove our flipper stop, use our regular spring-loaded stops, and we use an idiot jig to prevent a mistake here. This sets the fence. Again, tells you which stops to use, how to position the drawer front in the machine to be bored. And again, we've pre-bored all of the drawer fronts for the video. Alright, now we're going to bore one door. Let's turn this machine off and get this one prepared. Open the dust collection. Again, we're going to prepare our fences, move them into the right position based off of the jig that tells us where to put them, tells us which stops to use. Turn the machine on. We're just going to bore one of these doors. We've already pre-bored the rest of them. And from here, we're going to go straight to the assembly area and start assembling boxes. Using this hinge machine, you actually bore a 35mm hole and then press in a steel cup for that twist lock hinge. Alright, now we're going to prepare the end panels for our first cabinet, cabinet number 1, which is a 3-drawer bank. So we look for our template for a 3-drawer bank. We have our drawer guides on the template. The locations are identified, and the location for the stretchers are identified. simply bring up our drawer guides. We have all of the different size lengths for different depth cabinets just below us here in carts. These drawer guides are attached with 5mm Euro screws. And we just take the panel and put it on the actual assembly table. We call this a prep table here. These templates make it very easy for a beginner to go through this process. Then we need the deck for cabinet number 1. Slide that out. It's already in position where if you just walk straight to the table and drop it, it'll be correct. Then we orient our skids, which these are the skids that actually receive the legs, with a flat face toward the front of the cabinet. Drive the dowel down into the 15mm hole, and you're done. We bring our end panels up onto the side of the cabinet and start assembly. Making sure to hold the front staple back at least 70mm so that we leave room for the screws, and we'll also add 4 screws to this box. Next we go and get our stretchers and nailer for cabinet number 1. Again, they're identified on the end, so they're easy to find.